Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. I tried to dye my fringe green the other day and it just completely didn't work, like just basically absolutely nothing. And I can't decide if I should give it another go with the same thing or I should just try and find something else. You know, let me know in the comments below. I thought you'd be able to see my top a bit more. I always think this. Yes, today's video is about my 2024 reading goals. I don't think I'm going to talk about them in super depth, but yeah, I just thought I'd sort of talk about them. And also my 2025 reading goals, which obviously I haven't yet to do. Also, I have a couple that are like rolling over because I did really badly at them. I would say the main two goals that I focused on in 2024 was reading more than 50% books published before the year 2000. Which is still ongoing, which is why I'm not going to talk I'm not going to talk super in depth about it, because I kind of want to do maybe like a video where I wrap up and talk about my experience and like what I've learned. And I also was trying to do this like reading a book from every year of the 20th century project. I believe I still only have the 1930s left. I'm not sure if I will get to that, but like I could potentially. I also had a very low-key goal, which was to read one book by a Yiddish woman in translation, and that is Anna Margolin's During Sleepless Nights and Other Stories, translated by Daniel Kennedy from my fave Phalag Diasporist Press. And yeah, it's just like a really short story collection. This was like a very easy goal because I wanted to read more Yiddish women in 2023, and I think I did really badly, and in 2022 was like the year when I started doing this, and I think I read like 3 or something in that year, and I really liked that, but then yeah, like in 2023 I just failed at it so bad, so I thought I would like put it on as a project but just make it like very, very easy to do. And I mean, I even made it even easier for me to do because I did pick the literal smallest Yiddish woman authored book that I have on my shelf, but yeah. I also had a couple of goals related to like my acquisition of books and, you know, like how many I was going to read before, or like if I could, you know, bring more into my home. Like I do get lots of free books, but like that's still a lot of books. And so last year, I'm not going to tell you numbers, I think, because I'm shy, but I definitely did do a pretty good job of bringing less. I just said less, that was the main aim. And it's also about like maybe getting a bit more in control of like prioritizing, you know, what I want to read, what I own, and then also kind of making pockets of non-work reading and work reading and kind of trying to get a bit more balance between the two. And like I definitely don't feel like I was like successful, or that's definitely still something I want to work on, and I would really like to be working on reading more of the books that I own and more of the books that I bring into my life still. But I definitely feel like I made progress with this, so I'm pretty happy with how it's gone out. It is my birthday coming up soon, and I do imagine I will get a few more books, but even with that, I definitely have cut about a third of the books that I brought in from last year, if that makes sense. So that's great. I did also want to read more of the books that I already owned, like as in before this year, and I did do that too so far. I mean, I've already surpassed last year's numbers, but I'm hoping to maybe go a bit more, but yeah, it's still pretty low in comparison with the number of books I've read. And like part of that is because especially in the recent months, I've definitely been doing a lot more like audiobook reading of books that I don't own, and then also like my graphic novel reading too, like I don't own those, and like obviously using a library is great, but it does also sometimes get in the way of you reading your actual books and shelves and stuff, and then also if you can't really physically read, that'll also do it. But you know, I'm glad that I also made progress with this too. But yeah, I'd definitely like to keep making more progress. I think that's sort of everything. I guess I'll get to some of the others that I had as I say that they're, you know, passing over into the next year. So where should we start? Well, we'll start with those, I guess. So I wanted to read some Helen Oyeyemi this year. I did not do that. I have Gingerbread, which I just like adored by her like so much when I first read it. I think maybe in 2022 now. So I'd really like to reread this. And I also have another book by her on my shelf. This is The Icarus Girl, which I also really want to read. I think the problem with me picking this one up is actually I have one more by her. I mean, I want to read basically all of her work, but specifically there's one that I want to read the most, I think, and that's White is for Witching. and I kind of do want to read it more than this, and so I think that's sort of what is stopping me too, is because I kind of am like, oh, but I want to read that one. But I think I'll try to reread this one first. But anyway, yes, so basically I want to read at least one book by Helena Ayemi in 2025. Oh, here it is. The second author that I also failed to read from this year, but I'm going to keep pushing to do so, and that's Angela Carter. So I have The Shadow Dance, or Shadow Dance by her, which is her debut, and then I also have The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffman, which, you know, I guess is a book I'm fairly scared of, but that's okay. So yeah, in 2025 I'd like to read one book at least by Angela Carter. And, you know, I mean, I could read this in September for Virgo season. Another goal I think I kind of had for 2024 was to complete the Ursi series. And I'm not sure if I want to, like, take this off for myself. I have read all of the, like, main books. I haven't read two, like, separate short stories that were published. Daughters of Odrin and maybe another one. So to some degree I do feel like I've sort of done this and also not, but I guess I think we'll like sort of give this to me. I'm not going to put this on my list of things to do next year. I think like I'll just do it, like, you know. I guess moving on to talking about stuff, like this wasn't like a main goal, but I was part of a reading group at the beginning of this year especially that was reading Natalia Ginzburg, which I talked about a lot, and I kind of might make a video still all about like all of the books I read from her, but I do have two books. Actually, I think there's another one by her actually that I also haven't read, and then there's also like two novellas or like short works that I know that the library has, which is called maybe Family and something else. So that's also on this list of books to read. But basically I did read the majority, I guess, just about the majority of her work. But I have these two still on my shelf. So this is Sagittarius. This one is translated. This one's translated by Avril Bardoni. I do feel like Natalia Ginzburg was so present with me, but like for the first like 5 months of the year, and I haven't read anything from her since. But is that true? I mean, I guess I read something in August from her, didn't I? But she was so like saturated in a lot of the other months, I feel. And then the other one I have is All Our Yesterdays, which is translated by Angus Davidson. Yeah, so I guess like the priority is to read these two because they are on my shelves. But yeah, that's also another goal for 2025, is to finish reading Natalia Ginzburg. Okay, I think those are like the main ones that are like somewhat connected with 2024. And now we'll just get on to ones that I want to do. So another author that I'd like to read from, partially because I did just get a new book from her, but I also still have another book from her on my shelf, but that's Marge Piercy. So I have Body of Glass, which is I think the one I want to read first. It's like a sci-fi novel. I think it takes like Golem mythology and like cyborgifies it, so I'm really interested. Like I really do want to read this. I just really should get to it. Whenever like Marge Piercy poems show up in like the Siddur and the Maxor that we use in synagogue, I'm always like, Marge, I love you. So yeah, there's Marge Piercy, and like this one I showed in a recent video, Braided Lives. And yeah, I mean I want to read it as well, obviously, but I think I should try and read the one that's been on my shelf the longest. Another specific author, I feel like I've not really done this before, but I think it's a good idea because there are authors that you read and you're like, wow, I love this work, and then like you'd never like keep going with their body of work when you clearly should, because you like vibe with it so hard, you know. But one person who I feel strongly about, even though I've only read one of her books, is Gina Apostol, who wrote Insurrecto, which I read last year, and I loved it. I thought it was just really fantastic and brilliant and so interesting, and just like such a beautiful work, and like so interesting in terms of how it told the story, and like was invested in like really cool kind of like historical film, anti-colonial history of violence, translation work, conversations, whatever, just like so good. And so I definitely want to check out more of her work, and a lot of it sounds really cool. Some of them have quite long names and now I can't remember any of them, but maybe I'll pick some pictures of the ones that I'm the most interested in. There's definitely one I'm thinking of that like I definitely really want to read next, I think. So yeah, there's her. I just realised there is another author who like is a specific author to read, but like this is begrudgingly. And I might make a video about like what plan I have to read him, and like which specific books I plan to read from him later. But that author is Henry James, who I've spoken about before as like not really liking, but people reference him a lot, and he's pretty big in terms of like the literary and also like politics in novels scene in the 1880s, 1890s, blah blah blah. So this is The Portrait of a Lady by him. Yeah, I need to like figure out like the parameters of my project. I think I'm going to probably pick 4 books from him that seem like the most either like referenced or relevant to my work and try and read them. And yeah, I mean, maybe I'll see if other people want to read him too, but also I feel like I don't really want to encourage people to read some man author. So there's that project as well. I think the final like main project I have is that I want to read French literature. I collected some French books on my shelf. Some of these have been like on my TBR for a while, and one of them I think is like new. But yeah, I think it's just like, I thought it would be nice to kind of do like a bit of a themed reading. It was almost sort of inspired by my experience reading Natalia Ginzburg. Obviously she's Italian and not French, but it was just in terms of like reading this one author and then feeling like really interested in getting kind of like a little snippet of like Italian women's writing, and like that experience I really enjoyed, and sort of was interested in how it can lead you to like not be able to understand like another country's literature, but just like can give you an insight into like a particular time or like whatever. I'm explaining it really weirdly, but I just like, you know, when I was reading Natalia Ginzburg, I was then interested in reading more Italian literature, and I have some on my shelf which I hope to get to soon. But I really like that process of like discovery and immersion in a way, and because I'm trying to read the books on my shelves, I obviously don't want to just be like buying loads of books. So I think the largest selection of books from one specific country that I have on my shelves is French, that I haven't read, that is not the UK or America. So these are the books that I'd like to read, and maybe some more. I kind of really would like to read a bunch of Colette, but I only have 2 of her works. I mean, I have basically shown all of these before, but that's also why I want to do this, because like clearly I do want to read these, I just never sort of prioritize them enough to get to it. Okay, so we've got The Inseparables by Simone de Beauvoir, translated by Lauren Alkin. I mean, Simone de Beauvoir, classic. Haven't read her yet. I mean, I've read snippets of her iconic feminist philosophizing, but never her fiction, which does definitely interest me, so yeah. And this one seems queer and is like about like girls coming of age, and I think when Andrea joins Sylvie's school, girls become close. They talk for hours about equality, justice, war and religion. They lose respect for their teachers. They build a world of their own. I think the problem with like a lot of these books is I do feel like they're kind of summer books that I want to read, but obviously you can't read everything in the summer. And maybe part of that is just because I've like associated translated books by women with the summer because of August's Women in Translation Month. But there's also something about like reading a translated fiction like whilst you're like hot and by the sea, or like, I don't know, you know what I mean? And we've got, this is non-fiction, so this is Maman, What Are We Called Now by Jacqueline Melsnell Amar, translated by Francine York. It's a diary of this woman, I think, in occupied Paris, I think, and in the like 40s. I'm pretty sure that she's Jewish. Oh, I imagine that must be her. It's been wanting to read that for a while. Then I have 2 books by Colette, like I said, The Pure and the Impure, with this great cover, and Claudine at School. This one I have had for many years, but actually looking at it, like, it doesn't seem like I should be that intimidated by it, so I should just read it. I think I actually originally got this because I was maybe going to write about it for my undergraduate dissertation. It's from the 30s, I think, and it's translated by Herma Bruffault, and then Claudine at School is the first in the Claudine series, and that's kind of what I would like to read in 2025. I sort of have an eye on reading that whole series, but, you know, we'll see. Be great to read at least one. This is translated by Antonia White, and yeah, it's the beginning of the story. It's like from maybe 1904, something like that. I haven't read any of these books, which is why I'm talking about them like weirdly, you know, like, sorry. I'll tell you more about them when I've read them. And then the last one I have is The Fortune of the Rougon by Emile Zola, translated by Brian Nelson. This is the first in the Rougon-Macquart series that he did. The main reason I got this is because of realism as a genre. I know that Zola is sometimes considered both a realist and a naturalist, which I actually do find quite confusing in terms of like how literary critics talk about, and I would say I do also find sometimes the conversations or like, yeah, writing about the demarcations of like literary genres to be quite confusing, because I'm not sure that I agree, I guess, with like how they differentiate things, slash, yeah, it just all starts to feel a bit confusing and sort of samey to me. But I thought it would be really interesting to read Zola, and also because he was being translated around the time of my era in in English, so people were reading him and then they were producing their own kind of like British naturalist, British realist fiction as well, which is different from French stuff. It's about this family. They're all connected, but like one part of it is legitimate, the other part is not, hence like the Rougon-Macquart, and I think it just like follows them. Where is it? When is it set? I think this starts in the 1850s or so. There's like, what, 12 novels in this series? There's quite a lot of them. So if I do like this, I can keep reading, I guess. I guess I want to start with the first book in the series, and then from there figure out like whether I should try to read the whole series if I'm like really enjoying it, or if I should just like pick and choose the ones that are most interesting to me. But yeah, I would like to do a bit of work like finishing some series that I started. Definitely, there's a couple series that I started like years ago, and one of them is the Imperial Raj series. So I'd definitely like to make some headway with that. I've only read the first book in that series, but I love that book, and I actually re-listen to like chunks of it quite regularly. It seems silly not to keep reading that series. And I'm sure there are others, but I haven't like sort of audited my series reading yet, but I might do that, and I might make another video about that. I don't know, we'll see. I think like the final kind of general goal for me is that I'd like to read more Jewish books. I read like a couple, and obviously I read one Yiddish woman written book, and then I read some like non-fiction, but I don't know, like I'd like to read a bit more, and I definitely like to read some Hasidic stuff, and maybe like specifically Martin Buber. It's a little bit like vague, but like, yeah, that's like a broad thing. And then within that, I definitely would like to read more of my Yiddish women in translation. I have 4 now on my shelves that I haven't read. 3 of them I've shown before. 3 of them, these were basically the ones that I failed to get to in 2023. But that's Dina, Deborah, and this short story collection, Found Treasure, Stories by Yiddish Women Writers. And I kind of am feeling like maybe I should start with this one. I don't know. Anyway, and then this was the one that I got most recently. It's A Provincial Newspaper and Other Stories by Miriam Karpilov, translated by Jessica Karzane. I loved the 2 Miriam Karpilov books that I read, also translated by Jessica Karzane, and when I saw that they were coming up with this, like this is a recent translation and publication of it, I was like, well, I have to get it. But yeah, it's also short stories, which notoriously I'm not great at, but when it's Yiddish women, I do care a lot more. So I think for 2025, maybe the goal should be that I read one, which is, you know, bare minimum, book by a Yiddish woman, but specifically it has to have already been on my shelf from like 2024, because the book that I did end up reading that counts for this challenge was one that I bought this year, so I feel like, you know, it's encouraging me to not read what I have, is basically what I'm saying. And I'm still really interested in these. I do just find them like maybe a bit hard to get into, but I think part of that is just that I'm, like I said, I'm a bit struggling with like balancing my reading for pleasure and my PhD reading, and then like when I do have like a bit of free space for reading, I tend to be very impulsive, so I don't like sort of follow plans very well, which I think just like impacts that too. But yeah, so I hope that all makes sense. It's quite a lot of books and projects, which I didn't, I guess, realise when I made this, but you know, I'm excited about reading, and I'm feeling like a bit more in touch, I guess, with my reading self. So that's nice. And yeah, let me know if you've read any of the books I mentioned, or how your goals and plans for 2024 went, or if you have ones for 2025. I'd love to hear about it. And I've definitely changed my mind. Like, I don't want to host like a Henry James read along, but maybe I can make some videos as a way to like make it fun for me. I think that's probably what I'd like to do, or at least maybe one video where I sum up my experience reading his books. It would also be kind of interesting for Zola, but then you'd have to like commit to reading like 12 books, so I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, I don't think I made one of these for 2024, whereas in 2023 I'm pretty sure I did make one, but they are quite nice to look back on, I guess, so maybe I'll look back on it in a year's time and I'll see how I've been okay at it. I was trying to not be positive, but I also don't want to set my expectations really high, so okay, I'm gonna shut up because I am rambling. I hope you're having a nice day when you're watching this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!